Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, my fellow colleagues. I am Oluwole Oke. Mr. Speaker, I'm from Osun State, representing Ijesha North people. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I move and I so move. Need to investigate the allegation of abuse of tax incentives, tax breaks, and tax waivers by public institutions and companies benefiting from tax incentives. Mr. Speaker, the House notes that it is within the ambit of the powers of the federal government to exercise executive and legislative jurisdiction over items in the executive legislative list, exclusive legislative list, contained in the second schedule to the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria, 1999, as amended. Mr. Speaker, items like taxation of incomes, profits, and capital gains, export and imports are exclusively within the control of the federal government. Mr. Speaker, the House also notes that in line with the above, the federal government of Nigeria exercise monetary and fiscal controls over the economy to stabilize both micro and macroeconomic conditions and fundamentals. Some of the tools available on monetary and fiscal policy authorities to tinker with the economy and stimulate economic activities in some sectors of the economy are tax waivers, tax breaks, tax exemptions, and tax incentives. Hence, when the government needs to attract investment and activities in a sector of the economy, it grants incentives in that sector. Recall, historically, that the federal government had issued policy documents in line with its fiscal goals and strategy. For example, the annual issuance for the fiscal policy measures by the Ministry of Finance, the periodic issuance of the value-added tax modification order. Some of this policy, Mr. Speaker, interventions have been effective in the past to achieve part of its objectives. The House further notes that available data also shows that while the federal government has good intentions, these practices have continued to create a major black hole in the purse of the government or the Federation. These losses are occasioned, Mr. Speaker, and driven primarily by abuses by companies that have been granted tax-based waivers and incentives. The House again notes that based on available data, Nigeria continues to lose about 8 trillion naira annually to tax incentives and waivers. About 6 trillion is lost to companies that abuse the system, while 2 trillion worth of waivers achieve the objectives of the federal government. Most of the abuses are arising from fiscal items like capital allowances, investment allowances, pioneer status incentives, free trade zone exemptions, value-added tax exemptions. Observe that these gaps have negatively affected Nigerian tax to GDP ratio of Nigeria, which stand at 10.6%, being one of the lowest in Africa. The gap created in the revenue profile of the government of the Federation has also contributed to the federal government seeking loans, grants, and aids to fund our annual budget deficit. Concerned that if urgent steps are not taken, Mr. Speaker, to investigate the situation, Nigeria may not only be hanging on a fiscal cliff, it may fall off the cliff and be heading to Venezuela, where it's a situation where a country has huge resources, but is in deep economic crisis, recession, and depression. The House therefore resolves to set an ad hoc committee, Mr. Speaker, to investigate the allegation and report back within 4 weeks for further legislative actions. I so move, sir.
Thank you.